So, in a sense, what we have read in the previous section, each time a great being comes upon earth, he comes to bring a greater light. But humanity, instead of making the effort to ascend to that light or embrace that light, it tries to limit it within its own cabins. And the result is a crystallized religion. So, the moment it becomes a crystallized formal religion, it tends to change into a political power system. So you have head priest and local goons, whatever. I mean, and then ultimately you have, see, ultimately, I have experienced entering, I mean, for want of a better word, sometimes they will, it's almost like money extortion. I felt so bad once going in to one of the temples in Dakshineshwar. I felt very bad. Such a powerful personality of Sri Ramakrishna. So, anyways, every religion has suffered the same fate. And by religion, we should know it is nothing to do with dharma. I not only say it is not dharma, it is nothing to do with dharma. This conception is entirely Western, this religion aspect, which is to reduce things into a formal ritual practice and then to build a hierarchical structure through which the human soul must strugglingly navigate to get the grace of the being up above. This is not an Indian conception at all. So people say, but in Indian conception also you have worship and rituals and all that. That Sri Aurobindo explains in Foundations. It was done because we understood that human beings move through different stages and gradations. And so there is something catered for those who are still ignorant and want to indulge only in externalities. If you ask a person, sit early morning and sit for meditation, most people take it as a unnecessary, or they tallow it. But if you say सुबह उठ के अगरबत्ती जला देना है, they do it. So it is to preserve for a certain kind. But it was always understood that the man who is doing agarbatti and diya and going to the temple is subordinated to is inferior to the man who is meditating and who is realizing the divine. And he who is realizing the divine was greater than the one who was just reading the scriptures. So it was always understood that these are stages of a great ascension. That was the saving grace. And every time a new revelations could come, there was scope for that. That masters will keep coming, and that's wonderful. It's not like, one master came and that's the end of the story. So, but this is what is the story up till now, that every time a great light has come, these are mother's words, humanity has reduced it to its own level of understanding. So it sees that the great being was sitting in, Vajrasan or whatever asan, and has given importance to that and not to the inner state. And that's how religions are formed. So, this is what we read. Now we are on page 8, beginning, right? But here the Divine Mother and Sri Aurobindo have come armed. Now that's where the story begins to change. So they know this. This is old fiasco. And so two things the Mother and Sri Aurobindo have done. One is that they knew and they said, I don't want to give my sanction to the old fiasco. This one thing. Second, world over, the Mother makes it very clear the age of religions is over. So whether you like it or not, yes, it won't last. It's the spirit of time. If I am right, most of the churches in Europe and England are empty. हाँ जी returning, they're turning into pups, and what we have.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
a conversation by the new pope with the old pope where he goes and telling it the amount of people and then coming inside is reducing. We need to do a major change in the system of church. Otherwise, we will have one fourth of them left by 2040.
Yeah. So because no, because
Start
see,
serving wine.
no, that is because people see the moment. Nee, that's for a see when people, after all, God provides a base for goodness. Now that base is gone. So what happens is people take naturally towards a leftist communist thought. You will see that in that entire belt, intellectual leftist thought. Its origin is like that. Then what about the Islamist? Now that movement has begun even in Islam, that people are beginning to question, leave, and again you see that turn towards leftist. This is the tendency. So you'll see that very easy for leftist Islamist blocs to come together, which is very strange because one doesn't believe in God and one is crazy,
Crazy about God.
not crazy about God, but will blow up everything in the name of his God. So, so the thing is, these are transitions happening throughout the world, and sooner or later this will be the fate. But within India, also many changes will take place. But because of the, we have seen all these upheavals and still kept to the, because Sanatan Dharma is like that. There is a tremendous plasticity and wideness in it, inbuilt. So it is bound to take a new course. So Sri Aurobindo and Dharma, using the base of Sanatan Dharma, have come to have come to give a new step, add a new step in the ladder. So, but for that, to build the step, they must build the bridge from the human consciousness, and that's why she has to identify with our humanity. That's what. Last two lines, or last line. The mortal's lot became the immortal's share. So she identifies with our humanity to build the bridge. Thus, trapped in the gin of earthly destinies, awaiting her ordeals, our abode, outcast from her inborn felicity, accepting life's obscure terrestrial robe, hiding herself even from those she loved, the Godhead greater by human fate. People have this idea of yogis that they don't have any problems, someone was saying, even with mother, they used to feel, how did mother fall sick? Today someone was asking me, how did mother fall sick? I said, she took upon herself the sickness of, how would she find a remedy? All this Sri Aurobindo describes later on in great detail. So the conception we have about uh, divinity is that it will never have these things. Now the reason why some saints manage it is because they rise above earthly nature and station themselves there. And then they don't plunge into it. So they carefully keep away all those things which can contaminate, or whereas the divine accepts everything. He says, come, 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 to whatever extent, and he keeps swallowing the poison and takes in, inhales all the human wickedness, misery, everything, and keeps returning compassion, love, beauty, goodness, because that's what is the divine. So this is the difference between an avatar and a typical traditional yogi. If a yogi wants, he can stay away. But an avatar has no choice but to embrace and accept. So she also now has come, and she has come to change humanity. So she must become human. accept all the human misery, all the human troubles. And there is a very cryptic line here: the Godhead greater by a human fate. How does the Godhead become greater by a human fate? Godhead is great in his majesty and splendor, but there is something which is missing, which only through the experience of matter you can arrive at. That is
Progress.
not only progress, of course, the gods can't progress, that is true, but there is an unfolding going on from within matter. And unless you unite the two, you cannot have the completeness of truth. Yes. You will always have truth which is disconnected. That's why in the Isha Upanishad we have those lines that those who go into the light alone, they go into a darkness. Those who live in the multiplicity, they live in darkness. Those who seek after knowledge alone, they plunge as if into a greater darkness. So he comes to join, and that is the greatness. It's a complete experience, completeness of the cycle. This mother describes in great detail at several places. Now comes what is the difference between an ordinary humanity and a extraordinary superhumanity of tomorrow. A dark foreknowledge separated her from all of whom she was the star and stay. It reminds me of the event of 5th December. See, the Divine Mother knew. 1 year back, in 1949, Sri Aurobindo had said, one of us will have to leave. Page 8. One of us will have to live. And he said that you will have to stay on and fulfill the yoga of transformation. Many indications. Now, mother had to play a double role. One is to accept what it would have meant upheaval in their lives. It's not easy. Even if you look at it, assuming the entire charge of this entire field. Of course, Sri Aurobindo is there working from behind in another dimension, but at the material level, she has to now take care. At the same time, she has to, all the people are turning to her for help. She says later on, earlier it was so easy for me. When people would come and tell me, I would just say, Lord, you take care. But now, she is the embodied being upon earth. So she can't do that. On the other hand, she has to conceal from the children what Sri Aurobindo has planned, decided. So she has that foreknowledge, but she keeps it. And there is a very interesting description. On 24th November, the only indication was that there was people were asked to little bit hurry through. The crowd was asked to hurry through Darshan Day. Yes, no, on 24th November 1950. So they hurried through. Then 2nd December, there was the playground, all the program. Everything was going on. Nobody had any indication that Sri Aurobindo has decided to withdraw. But this is the greatness of the great, that they will not disclose that what's going on inside. And because they are so vast as the ocean, their heart is so full of compassion. So a dark foreknowledge separated her. And see how too great to impart the peril and the pain. In her tone depths, she kept the grief to come. Too great to impart the peril and the pain. Just look at this line. No, she Knowing Satyavan is going to die and she has to take the challenge, she doesn't tell her in laws or her parents, nobody. She keeps it all within her. Why make others miserable? That is the greatness about not sharing the pain. Those who are really great, because they know that anyways I have to go through what I have to go through. But why should I add the burden of others? Because she has come to reduce the burden and she is the strength. So, in her tone depths, she kept the grief to come. And a beautiful image now, interesting image. As one who watching over men left blind takes up the load of an unwitting race, harboring a foe whom with her heart she must feed. Unknown her act, unknown the doom she faced, unhelped she must foresee and dread and dare. Now, who is the foe? It's very interesting. See this line. Takes up the load of an unwitting race. When blind people are given to her, take charge of them. What charge? You have to take them on a marathon. Blind, they don't know. What is the way, direction? Nothing. And if they have to run a marathon, all this whole race. So, blind race. But then comes this line, harboring, unwitting race, harboring a foe, whom with her heart she must feed. So among them, in this humanity, there are those who are opposing the very plan of the Godhead, what she has come to do. And she can't discard them. Them also she has to feed with her heart's love. So,
Christ had to feed.
yes, Judas. So she has to do that. The long foreknown and fatal morn was here. So now you see he's connecting the whole epic. Morning has come, she has woken up, and today is the day. Now the whole thing is building up. So finally that morning has come on which day Satyavan must die. Bringing a noon that seemed like every noon. Now again, very interesting line. That morning has come, it's noon time. Nobody knows. We human beings are, Shobinda describes in Ilion the day that Trojan War is going to take place and there will be chaos and disaster. So he describes that Zeus watches from top that this city has been built with so much love, care by the past gods. And when he leans, he sees the mother saying bye-bye to the children who are going to school. Then he sees that, there are farmers working in the fields and they are saying come back in the evening. Then warriors who are ready and they embrace and song and yeah, I'm going to come back. Keep this dinner ready. None of them knows that tonight Troy will burn. So he watches because he's the great God. So he watches all this. And for a moment he looks at all this and then impassively he goes back and gives this sanction. Yes, this is how it should be. Now, how do we understand the play of the gods? So this is because a new creation has to come up. So they have looked beyond that. But we have a limited vision. The long foreknown and fatal morn was here. For nature walks upon her mighty way, unheeding when she breaks a soul, a life. Leaving her slain behind, she travels on. See 26:11. Leaving her nature. One day, and people enjoying, somebody's partying. Movies made on that, and somebody's expecting a guest in the evening to go home. They have so many commitments, things, plans of today, tomorrow, and the future. Suddenly smashed. But at the end, what remains of all that? Some tales of exceptional courage and heroism. That survives. that is something you cannot destroy. And equally, some tales of utter cowardice, which is a lesson for humanity. But nature has walked, giving a sanction. Or a tornado comes, people are swept away. So, this nature walking like this, mother was asked that uh, about all these catastrophes, and she said, "You know, my child, our human consciousness is very small. So we think, oh, this happened for me to give me this lesson." She said, but nature is very vast. Her movements are on a much vaster scale, like that of the gods. So, they are not. Then she gives a very interesting example. He says, when you walk on the road, do you pay attention to how many ants you are crushing below your feet? We don't. This was exactly what Guru Nanak Dev had told Bandas. आपके साथ ऐसे कैसे हुआ? How could you be whipped and put in the jail? You are a man of God. He says, don't question God. But you explain to me. I have a doubt. Okay, you sleep tonight. Tomorrow I'll tell you. And next he says, by the way, how many ants do you know? He says, no, I don't know. He said, that is how when the divine afflatus moves, Mahabharata or world wars, but at the end, few things survive. And frankly, they were the things worth surviving. They are the gains of the race through all that. The race grows stronger through all these events. So when nature moves, it doesn't take you, oh, that person. But there are individual survival stories. Those who are in contact with something beyond nature. I know this Kedarnath whole thing. So, apne Anand Bhai, he had survived. There are stories of survival where most unexpectedly people survived. Because you are in contact with something beyond. So that takes care of you. But as far as nature is concerned, humanity, we think as a human being, all the constituents of our body and mind and vital are supplied by nature. And even if you take material nature, which breaks the body, our body is constituted by material nature. But material nature is not just constituting our body, but all the human bodies, animal body, plant body, rocks and minerals and ocean, all this is material nature. And imagine its energy and vastness and power. So when it moves, actually, to appreciate that movement, one has to see some of the pictures in retrospect. When you look at, this tsunami wave.
Yes, that's what we saw in Thailand when it came. Somebody had taken a
Yes, snapshot.
from up in some building.
You feel it's either Kalis with flowing hairs, dark hairs. So,
All the scars and all were like, gee,
yes, to appreciate those movements, you need a vast consciousness. So, nature moves. Man only marks and God's all seeing eyes. Man only says this happens, marks. टिक मार्क की सुनामी आई थी और गॉड्स ऑल सीइंग आईज. Of course, here later on he'll describe at length why destructions are necessary. All this,
He described in
several places he will describe it. At one place, bombs, bomb shells, and all that is going on, terrorism. This in book 2 there is Canto 8 and Canto 9, Canto 7 and Canto 8. There Sri Aurobindo describes descent into the world of darkness. So at the end, piercing through falsehood, he discovers why all this is permitted. So there is, he foresees bomb cells, writhen bodies, people chanting that, oh, I have won, we have slain our enemies, and priests chanting the dooms that, see, we have slain our enemies, God will be so happy with us. All that he describes. And then he writes toward the later part, he discovered what he saw after all this. He saw in destruction, creation's hasty pace. Death as a cellar in the house of life, and hell as a shortcut to heaven's gate. Now, there are practical examples of this destruction, creation's hasty pace. Two places where I went this December. One was Vizag. Vizag after Hudhud is no more the Vizag before Hudhud. Completely changed. All the lights and everything, and which were long pending, it would have never happened. The residents say it was devastating. During that phase when the rebuilding was going on, it was terrible. But now the residents, a tourist place. And the second was Bhubaneswar, which was hit with another of this Fani. So Fani came, flattened everything. And after Fani has gone away, slowly they started rebuilding. Now Bhubaneswar is so much changed. Even the lighting system, all the things they perfected. So each destruction is for a greater new creation. And Sri Aurobindo goes on to say, the greater the destruction, the mightier the new creation is going to be. So you see, that's why India has hope. Coming back to India, India has gone through how many centuries of progressive destruction of everything possible. From loot and plunder, what else? So now it is the chance or time given to India now to rise. Because it has paid the price, and what a price! I am not sure if any country has paid this kind of price. To be constantly subject. One group is leaving, another is coming in.
Vanquish one after the other.
One after the another. And to a land which had men like Bhishma and Sri Krishna's India, Sri Rama's India, where it had to go through it because something even better and higher has to come. So that is the logic of it. But that he will explain elsewhere. But it's a good point to touch it here. But the greatness of the great again, even in this moment of her soul's despair, in its grim rendezvous with death and fear, no cry broke from her lips, no call for aid. She told the secret of her woe to none. Calm was her face, and courage kept her mute. So this is, if we look at what a human being should be, so several places Sri Aurobindo describes, especially in this next canto. But what a human being should be. What is the one definition of courage? That you are calm. You don't start rushing here and there and, I am afraid this is going to happen, that is going to happen. Come and help me. Sometimes I wonder, we take things for granted. Look at Rama's life. In the forest, when Janki is abducted, he neither takes the course of sannyas, saying that this is God's will. Like we say, every event on earth is God's will. He could have said, Bhagwan ki marji hai ji, kya hai? Ab main sannyas le lunga. Anyways, now I have lost everything. He doesn't do that. Coming out of his kingdom was dharma. Kidnapping of Janki is adharma. So it's not about accepting everything as God's will. Second, he doesn't call for help either from Ayodhya or from Videhraj, Janak, Mithila. Both had powerful armies. Very powerful armies. That's why Ravana never attacked that side. He doesn't call for help. He takes it all on himself. This is the sign of the great. So, yet only her outward self suffered and strove. Even her humanity was half divine. Mother once speaks of this story of Queen Elizabeth I, and it's her own story. She says when she's on deathbed and a lot of false things were spread around her. People are like that. Always they have been. So all the peasants came and finally they marched to the palace. We want bread, we want bread. Now the ministers don't want her to know this truth. And she is on deathbed, so it's a very good time to make sure that. She hears their outright and says, "I want to meet them. They are my people." No, Queen, Empress, you should not walk. You'll die. She says, "Death can wait." But death can wait. I must listen to them. These are the great heroic leaders. So slowly he is introducing us to the persona of Savitri. Her spirit open to the spirit in all. Her nature felt all nature as its own. This morning we read that she readily accepted everybody, whoever came to her. Apart, living within, all lives she bore. Aloof, she carried in herself the world. Her dread was one with the great cosmic dread. Her strength was founded on the cosmic mights. So, though the action seems like an individual action, it is a cosmic action. So, the avatar comes to change the law, not rise above the law, not escape the clutches of. Then, what is the point? He need not have come down or to prove that, look how great I am, that in the midst of difficulty I vanished like this, doing an impossible miracle. Avatar easily all these things are possible. Sri Aurobindo knew about the art of even materializing a human being. Yeah, there are stories like that. Materializing. Literally. Even gods materializing and reaching out. But not going into that story. I have myself shared one of those where, Anmol also knows. So, that Agarbatti story. So, I'll share it. He could materialize human beings. But, so he could have easily dematerialized himself or materialized. He knew about. People asked him about materializing and dematerializing. He said, yes, it's possible. It's possible even to dematerialize yourself and rematerialize at a distance or in several locations. He said, yeah. But he says that's not what they have come here to do. People will take you as great, but nothing changes in us. Lot of, ये तो छोटे मोटी चीज है, अगरबत्ती धुआं ये सब. Imagine living creature, complex beings like human beings. See, materializing a elementary physical object is still okay, but materializing even a living being is difficult. And human being is an extremely complex. How can you do it? There is a process. It's not like chalo aise ho ja to ho gaya. All miracles have a process. So Sri Aurobindo at one place says there is no miracle. Or we can say that is a miracle whose process we do not yet know. So it's not like there is a jadoo. There is no jadoo in nature. Nature will not allow jadoo. You have
are just bringing down the higher consciousness into the lower consciousness. People in the lower consciousness don't understand it.
No, there are. So they use the word miracle. But this bringing down or whatever process, there are many steps in the series, many things which can go wrong or right.
On the complexity of the act.
In this, when Narad comes down, so he describes the name of the 5 elements.
Yes.
How ether becomes air, becomes fire.
So all these things are involved in that process. You can't just, suddenly do it. So this is how they could do, but they have not come for that. They have come to change the law. So that once they change it, taking upon themselves, then it becomes a new yardstick for everybody. It's like, let's say the leader who signs the law, he gets caught. Now, most of the time, it will never happen. But supposing a standing leader of a ruling party gets caught, now he realizes that actually it is not because of his fault, it is because of the fault of the law. And so he understands now how the law operates, how the prison systems, how horrible they are. And then he comes out and changes them. It is like that. But he will never know it if he just goes on a casual inspection. When you go on an inspection, everything is kept perfect and everybody is, all up to date. The food is best. So how would you know? So he enters the prison house disguised as a commoner and sees how prisoners are treated, sees that, how people can be framed up, and then he has the way to change. So this is exactly what he is saying it at a highest possible level. The universal mother's love was hers. The universal mother's love was hers. Against the evil at life's afflicted roots, her own calamity its private sign. So, people would ask, what is the big deal about Savitri and Satyavan's story? Okay, there was one Satyavan. Okay, even if you grant that she revived, so how does it affect our lives? It affects because it's a possibility that the dead can be revived within a certain period of time. Now, today, science accepts this possibility. It's interesting. There are physical instruments created now that within a certain period of time, you can bring back. Now, it's not that Savitri has done that, but at least one day man will discover that there are ways and means by which we can bring back from the land of death. The forces that pull you away and hold you in the grip can bring you back. Whether you want to come back or know whether it's good or not good is a different story altogether. In ignorance, it is as meaningless to bring back to the same old body and the same old maladies. But the idea is her own calamity, its private sign. Of her pangs, she made a mystic, poignant sword. Lovely line. What do? I am having pain, suffering. This person has cheated me. That person has deceived me. What do? I am having anguish. So there are all kinds of advices. So she says, of her pangs, she made a mystic, poignant sword. Now, what do you do with that sword? Go and kill the person? No. You plunge within your own depths, slay the ego, and release the soul. So it becomes a mystic, poignant sword, a solitary mind, a worldwide heart. To the lone immortal's unshared work she rose. Nobody can help her in this task. At first life, now a new movement starts, okay, after this background. So simultaneously, two things are going on. One is that he's describing the known transition, then he's describing Savitri's condition, and then he's connecting it on the physical level. So look how beautifully Sri Aurobindo blends different states of consciousness. So he's saying, to the lone immortal's work she rose. Now she rose, she physically rose. She is now waking up from the bed, because what follows next is Savitri is waking up from the bed. But at the same time, look at, she rose to the lone immortal's work. How it changes the whole perspective. One is that day the morn came and she rose. But she rose for what? Now, if you look at it, this line need not mean physically rising. She rose for the lone immortal's work. But following lines show it is also a physical rising. See how they blend the outer and the inner. All through in Sri Aurobindo we will see a beautiful blending of the outer and the inner, of the earth and the divine reality, of the spiritual and the material. At first, life grieved not in her burdened breast. She has opened her eyes. So there is right now the first, yeah. On the lap of earth's original somnolence, inert, released into forgetfulness. Temporarily, like all of us, released into forgetfulness. Prone it reposed, unconscious on mind's verge, obtuse and tranquil like the stone and star. In a deep cleft of silence, twixt two realms, between the waking and the dream, there is a cleft. Mother speaks of this cleft in great detail when she was in France itself. And then when she went to Algeria, she said that there is a moment when I forget. When I am coming, I remember almost the entire journey when I transit from the highest worlds to here, but towards the last bit I forget something. So Madame Theon said, because there is still a layer, envelope, which is not developed consciously. So she spent quite some time in becoming conscious of that layer, so that there is no cleft and there is one continuity of memory. She lay remote from grief, unsown by care, nothing recalling of the sorrow here. Then a slow, faint remembrance, shadow like moved, and sighing she laid her hand upon her bosom and recognized the close and lingering ache. She loves Satyavan, he is going to die today. Suddenly, all these days, this has taken a place here. Deep, quiet, old, made natural to its place. This is a pain she carries within her heart, and now it has become natural. She doesn't have to remember. It just comes back. But knew not why it was there, nor whence it came. So first she becomes aware of this sensation, which is because of the deep pain, the attachment, the suffering, the foreknowledge. The power that kindles mind was still withdrawn. So you'll see the stages of sleep here. How we wake up. Again, just as he has transitioned from night to day, there is a psychological transition also. Almost in the same degree. So first we wake up, first we are one with the stone and the star. Look the contrast. But all in the state of inertia. Then we wake up, we don't yet remember the burden of the previous day and the future that is going to come. Then slowly, if supposing, people don't even remember sometimes severe pains. And then the moment they make the movement, then it comes back to them. So like memory brings it back. And yet, the mind is still in a state of sleep. Heavy, unwilling were life's servitors, like workers with no wages of delight. Sullen, the torch of sense refused to burn. So, what happens? It's a very interesting, actually, physiology. Senses take in as food all the different energies which are impacting us. We just call it sight and sound and taste and smell, because that is how we are trained and accustomed. But if you resolve all this, you can resolve all this into vibrations. So, what was the original purpose of sense? To receive the contact of the world and connect it with the individual. This is their original purpose. But sense origin is also that how the divine connects with his own world. So there is the divine sense. But divine sense doesn't connect in the ignorant human way. The divine sense transmutes every experience to delight. So the senses, even now, they still look for channels of joy. Whether it is eyes now, or ear, or taste, they look for smell. They are touch. So they're looking for, but delight is too difficult. They cannot bear it. So they look for joy, for pleasure, things like that. And through that they grow. Contrary thing is also there. If you don't give this food, if you dry them up, then slowly they refuse to function. So Sri Aurobindo says in one of the letters to Dilip Kumar Roy, it is no part of our yoga to dry up the senses.
Channelize them into higher
Transmute, yes, they have to be transmuted. Now that is the difficult part. But human beings either indulge or in sannyasa they dry it up. Because, this is all. But at least ordinarily also, senses are originally. Now this is a food for them. So what happens? Ultimately, who takes this food? The sixth sense, the mind. So the real enjoyer is the mind. And if you see, we don't enjoy objects. It is the mind that enjoys the object. And the mind can create images to enjoy. That is the interesting part. And one can use it to a lot of advantage. You may be in a prison house and the mind can create objects, fill your world with objects. But normally we are not trained to do that. That's how great poets and authors, they have used the mind to create a world, even though outside everything was. So the mind had a capacity that regardless of what the senses are drawing from outside, the mind can change it into something else because it is the master sense. That's why it's called as the sixth sense. Not just that, sixth sense means anything it will sense. Yes, that is there. But it is where the integration of senses takes place. So how he is describing all these things in very nutshell. Elsewhere he will describe in detail. The unassisted brain found not its past, only a vague earth nature held the frame. But now she stirred, her life shared the cosmic load. At the summons of her body's voiceless call, her strong, far-winging spirit travelled back to the yoke of ignorance and fate. She is the Divine Mother's incarnation. She has gone to her worlds, having colloquy with the gods. She is called back, come, come, come. This is the work. Right now, here is the mission. Back to the labor and stress of mortal days. Lighting a pathway through strange symbol dreams. Across the ebbing of the seas of sleep. Her house of nature felt an unseen sway. So house of nature is the body, and whole process is described in vivid detail. Waking up process. Now imagine every aspect of human life and cosmic life has been described in Savitri and in its deepest sense. That's why even Mother said, no, everything is there in Savitri. If you really read Savitri thoroughly, you'll have the deeper essential knowledge of everything. Of course, if you ask what are the chemicals working inside the senses, that's a different kind of knowledge. But the essential knowledge you will have, enough to practically navigate you through life. That's why it's so important to use these senses rightly. So you know that mantra which is Bhadram Karnevi. Someone remembers it?
Karne vi pashyama.
Ah.
Sorry, Bhadram Karne vi
Shunyam Deva. Then eyes ke liye. All these. So why? So what is it? It is not just that, I'll shut my eyes. This was a strange doctrine. I'll shut my eyes, shut your ears, shut your mouth. Here, there is a different logic. He is saying, may I hear the auspicious. May I see the auspicious. And so why all this? Because so that they can be motivated in the right way to function. So that the mind can be filled with beauty and delight of the divine which we are supposed to receive from the world. Illumined swiftly where life's darkened rooms and memories, casements opened on the hours.
Imagery, memory.
And they are actual facts. That is how Sri Aurobindo says that, nothing has been written just for picturesque purpose. The real experiences, that's how things happen. Only we don't know. Oh, this is so beautifully written poetry. No, it's not just poetry. It is how it happens, the memory casements. So memory suddenly opens up the door. And then, so where is memory stored? This is, physically, scientists are wondering where, even till date, there are different theories. Whether it's the within the cell, RNA, or whether it's in the portion of the brain, whether is it in every cell, where exactly is memory? Or is it beyond all of this? It's in some kind of information stored somewhere. This is the latest. Yeah, exactly like cloud computing. People speak about it that like information bits, somewhere it is stored. Now, we don't know, probably physical things are only processes through which it expresses itself. But where is memory exactly located? So, casements opened its doors and there it comes rushing into it. And the tired feet of thought approached her doors. All came back to her. Earth and love and doom. Earth, nature, she has accepted. Love, which she embodies and brought, and doom, which opposes. So all three have come once again back to her. The ancient disputants encircled her. So, love and doom are the ancient disputants, not life and death, but love and death. Here, doom is. So, how love and death? What is the. Life and death are not opponents, they are two sides of one process. So, how is love and death opposed to each other? So, if you see, love's characteristic power is to unite. So, from electrons and protons held within the atom, molecules, crystals, actual material objects, they're all because of the ultimately the binding force of love. Okay, so this love, and from there, the stars, galaxies, human consciousness, each level, it takes different forms. Animal level takes a form of attraction, to unite, attachment, affection, human love, where it gets the most distorted because there is lack of spontaneity and all kinds of things that come into it. But still, it's a process. To the love in the mystic's heart, turning towards the one. To the love that embraces whole creation. So all this is the story of love. Love is uniting. What is death doing? Dividing. So in atoms, how does it work? Disintegrating force. In the stars, how does it work? Disintegrating force. So that's why he says, thou who art the eater of the remnants of the sun. Death. Sri Aurobindo addresses one place. Savitri tells death, you are the eater of the cold remnants of the sun.
Why cold remnants
Because it has lost its sight. That's the technical truth. See, how do stars die? Actually, it's amazing, Sri Aurobindo's kind of, what shall I say, knowledge even of the most material things. So, after a time, the fuel burns out. So, the star begins to collapse. And literally, it is the sun grows cold. The star grows cold. So, now when it grows cold, what happens? There is something in it, no? There was an energy, mass. What happens to that? Where does it disappear? So, physicists will find equations for it. But there is a power that eats and grows. It's its job to eat and grow. So it has its place, all that will come later on, with the power that divides. So ultimately, its field is largely material nature. See, that is the interesting part. Its field is largely material nature. So what it does in Savitri, we'll see toward the end, it creates a gulf between the soul's demand and the body's limits. And eventually a gulf between the divine and material world.
And that is where the crisis is.
Because that's the foothold. The stronghold of falsehood, death, ignorance, unconsciousness is matter. And the more we are entrenched in matter, the more we are easily governed by these forces. So it's logically goes like this is the gad hai unka. So they try to bind us by all means. Like sickness is one means to bind you to turn your attention back to matter. So if you get bound, and you'll see when people are lying in the bed for a long time, slowly all the forces of disintegration begin to work. This is the way. And then, of course, scientists, we see the later results, processes. What we call as causes are actually results of a chain of things happening behind. And then they lead to more processes. But this is the disintegrating force. But if you have to establish a divine life upon earth in material body, then you have to take head on the challenge of these forces. Because matter is the stronghold. Life also, but I mean the plane of life and mind also, because ultimately in Pralaya even the mental worlds are dissolved. But most important is here. Memory of their civilizations which have been wiped out, living without leaving a trace. So this is the challenge between love and doom which earth faces. This battle is nowhere else so precarious because earth is the stronghold. Like giant figures wrestling in the night, the godheads from the dim inconscient born awoke to struggle and the pang divine. And in the shadow of her flaming heart, at the somber center of the dire debate, a guardian of the unconsoled abyss. Now he's describing the inconscient. But as the being, the being of darkness, embodying that. So all this pain and suffering, where does it go ultimately? It feeds that. So it is stored there. So pain is not born with life or man. Sri Aurobindo says that. Its shadow is born. The moment creation plunged into the inconscient, there is the first birth of suffering. The moment the forces felt cut off. It's there in Savitri in the book of fate. That the moment the forces of creation got cut off from the divine, they plunged into inconscient. And then they realized what has happened. So a cry of anguish. So you see, in the inconscient, there is constantly an anguish, a pain, a sense of suffering, separation. It takes weird expression in human beings. So the more suffering and anguish we are experiencing, means the inconscient's hold is very strong upon the nature. It is the cry of the abyss. So what is it longing for? Fill me, fill me, fill me. Not F-I-L-M-Y, sorry. F-I-L-L-M-E. Fill me. That's how, when people experience these states of loneliness. So the difference between being lonely and being alone. So being lonely is, oh, I'm so lonely. I wish I had somebody. Now this is because like a abyss is demanding somebody to love, somebody to care. Ultimately it is seeking that divine love which alone can fulfill. But divine love is too far for it. At least that's what it feels. So it clutches onto anything. And the moment it clutches, it eats it up. And by eating it, destroys the very source of what could nourish it. So there is the primitive kind of love where a person swallows and destroys the one whom he loves. Isn't it? So now you understand psychologically how it operates, the inconscient operates. So there is the wrestle going on. It swallows it up. It wants that love because it knows that only can heal the abyss. Because originally, love has gone into the abyss to rescue creation. So since then, this struggle is going on, and because of the labor of love, literally the labor of love, creation is being pulled out of this chaos, and it has come up to man. So up till now, all the rounds ultimately, love is winning. Now is the penultimate round where you can cross over. So he's describing it's guardian of the unconsoled abyss. You cannot, except for the divine love, there is no other way it can be healed. Inheriting the long agony of the globe, a stone still figure of high and godlike pain. See, several places we'll see here. Sri Aurobindo, actually we talk about adverse forces and hostile forces and all these things. But Sri Aurobindo said, Mother says that Sri Aurobindo ultimately believed in oneness. That was the master note. So we should know there are hostile forces, adverse forces, but they are not the original reality. They are not, otherwise we become like, other religions. There is, behind them also, there is the one. So you see, he spoke about God-like when he's talking of doom and love. Again, God-like pain. Stared into space with fixed, regardless eyes that saw grief's timeless depths, but not life's goal. So, as I said, psychologically, when you look at it, there are times when we feel there is no goal in life. All this is meaningless, goalless, meaningless. Again, why? In this fellow inconscient is creeping in somewhere through some thought suggestions. So we should be careful. Afflicted by his harsh divinity, bound to his throne, he waited. Bound to his throne, he waited unappeased the daily oblation of her unwept tears. She has not wept, but this fellow is waiting for her to come one day. Look at it, you can read this in various ways. Ravana is waiting all his life. One day, I will have the divine love. But unfortunately, the fellow loses his one chance of a lifetime. The moment he saw Mother Sita, he would have fallen at her feet and said, "Maa bacha lo ab." बहुत हो गया. But by then he is so much in this momentum of illusion of victory. He says, oh, just a woman. Because now he has got used to this pattern and idea. Though for her he has waited. All his life is a waiting for Mother Sita to come and redeem him. And then she agrees to go. And so same way we see here that he is waiting. All the fierce question of man's hours relived, the sacrifice of suffering and desire, earth offers to the immortal ecstasy, began again beneath the eternal hand. The sacrifice of suffering and desire, earth offers to the immortal ecstasy, began again beneath the eternal hand. So, It is waiting. Human beings are crying, weeping, all their tears. कोई फर्क नहीं. Let God Himself come and perform the sacrifice. Then I will see. So you see, that's what happens. The Titan chooses to wrestle with the divine. Divine says, so be it. So now the Divine Mother herself comes, assumes a human face and says, so be it. And here she starts the suffering, the sacrifice of suffering and desire. Awake, she endured the moment's serried march and looked. Again, you see now, he brings us back to now she's awake. So she is for a while resting and all these figures have come. So awake, she endured the moment's serried march and looked on this green, smiling, dangerous world. That's what this world is. Green, smiling, dangerous. Why should it be one-sided? Either we say, oh, this is a ugly world, and everything. But all is not ugly. There is beauty also sprawling in the fields of God. So there is here beauty and charm and joy and danger and difficulty and pain all together. It's a package. And heard the ignorant cry of living things. This line is so powerful. So she wakes up. So normally when we wake up, cup of tea or whatever our agenda, she's the divine. What does the divine experience? Cry of living things. माँ चारों तरफ से चीत्कार हो रहा है. Come mother, come mother. Even in her sleep she was doing it. When someone asked Sri Aurobindo that so and so had passed away last night and I had prayed to mother, did the mother hear the calls? He said, Sri Aurobindo says, thousands of calls come to her every minute and she responds to them. But obviously, she would not remember it like an encyclopedia. Yet, if she wants, she can access those memories. Thousands of calls are coming every minute. Mother also later on says the same thing. So, amid the trivial sounds, the unchanging scene, her soul arose, confronting time and fate. Immobile in herself, she gathered force. This was the day when Satyavan must die. So you see, the dawn is the day when Satyavan must die. Look at now the beauty of Sri Aurobindo, how he has organized Savitri. Where does Savitri begin? It begins from the end. Okay? And where does Savitri end? It ends with a new beginning. See, if you read Savitri, the last line is, you can see it right now. Yes. And in her bosom nursed a greater dawn. And it begins with the thick of the night of the day when Satyavan must die. So this itself, that we think about end and beginning as two different things, but they are connected so deeply with each other. So he's a master poet, only he can do like this. And he has put it in the beginning to make it clear what this story is about. And this is the day. So in the second canto, when she wakes up, the issue. So what is the issue about Satyavan's death? What is the problem? What is the big deal? People die. So what's the issue about death? A lot of people will say that. ठीक है, just accept it. It's part of life. Make the most of what yet you can, until unto the dust we descend. Dust unto dust, and under dust to lie. Sans wine, sans song, sans singer, sans sand. What is there? Live beautifully, die gracefully. This is one kind of thought. So he must describe what really is the issue. What is the problem? It's not just about death, for death's sake, that no, you must be saved for the sake of preserving our longevity. But there is a deeper issue that will be revealed in this canto. And then after that, from canto 3 onwards, there will be a long journey that she has woken up, she has to confront. Today is the day of D-Day. So, but how did she come? Now people want to know. Savitri you have introduced. Imagine a cinematographic canvas. It is starting with utter darkness, and slowly the cosmos is the canvas. Stars slowly lit up, then slowly things fading, light coming up, and then as light falls, people are moving and Savitri is waking up. Okay? So then she has introduced Savitri. But what has Savitri come here for? That is the next step. Okay. So canto 2, the issue. So now she is woken up. So people want to know what really is the storyline. So the Sutradhar is revealing to us the storyline. So what is the issue that is being taken up in Savitri? Outwardly it looks like Savitri, Satyavan's death and rescue. But if it is just that, then it's not worth probably, taking it up as a whole epic. But first he describes weaving this canto into the second one. As Savitri wakes up, what is the next state of consciousness? A while withdrawn in secret fields of thought, her mind moved in a many imaged past that lived again and saw its end approach. Dying, it lived imperishably. Dying, it lived imperishably in her. Transient and vanishing from transient eyes. So, though we think the past has gone, but it lives somewhere within us. Subconscious part even thinks of the past life, and it becomes a drag toward the future. Invisible, a fateful ghost of self. It bore the future on its phantom breast. Along the fleeting events, far backward trail, regress the stream of the insistent hours. She is going back in time. Today is the day, then, how she came, how they met each other, and before that, and the whole trail of time, possibly the entire cosmic past. And on the bank of the mysterious flood, peopled with well-loved forms, now seen no more, and the subtle images of things that were, her witness spirit stood, reviewing time. Now you see how Sri Aurobindo describes when she is reviewing. So this is like a psychic reviewing of a whole, up till now she has grown up to this age, and within that period, what all she has seen, experienced, all that she once had hoped and dreamed and been, flew past her eagle winged through memory's skies. So all her hopes, dreams, childhood aspirations, everything suddenly fly past. As in a many-hued, flaming inner dawn, her life's broad highways and its sweet bypaths lay mapped to her sun-clear recording view from the bright country of her childhood's days. So now step by step he's saying that how they are going before the inner screen. See, in this review, she's not reviewing with a burdened heart. Today I'm going to die, or my husband is going to die, oh my life, who made my life like this? No. Their life's broad highways, sweet bypaths, everything she's seeing, a total picture. This is how the psychic sees life. Lay map to her sun clear recording view from the bright country of her childhood's days and the blue mountains of her soaring youth. This is the Madra kingdom. And the paradise grooves and peacock wings of love to joy clutched under the silent shadow of doom. In a last turn where heaven raced with hell, 12 passionate months led in a day of fate. So, it's of course majestic, marvelous. So, she has seen this. And now we'll read these 6-7 lines, then stop. They are very powerful lines. Always to remember, because often in life, darkness comes in everybody's life. Unfortunately, we think that time we are singled out, but it's part of the journey. As when we were child, we were told, जब गॉड आए उन्होंने भी सफरिंग देखी. इसमें क्या है? इवन Rama and Krishna and Christ and Buddha, they all went through this path. So who are we? Equally, there was a sobering thought when, thought about tyrants and titans. रावण और कंस आए, वो भी चले गए. ये कौन है? So these were such small little sayings which were so spontaneous but reflective of a profound truth. An absolute, supernatural darkness falls on man sometimes when he draws near to God. Because, until everything is taken away, either you decide, I am going to leave these clutches and supports and turn directly. Then everything will be there in your life, but you have turned. That is a sunlit path. Or if no, then they are removed from you. That's why Mother used to say, if you turn to divine and say, I am yours, it's a serious thing. If the divine accepts it, then whatever prevents you, nothing in the world will be able to hold you back. If you cling to it, it will be taken away. So you have to be very careful. So stay in a state of detachment. You be in the world but not of the world. So it is safe to those around and it is safe for your journey. Otherwise it will be like a tearing, which is not what divine wants. An hour arrives when fail all nature's means. Forced out from the protecting ignorance and flung back on his naked primal need, he at length must cast from him his surface soul and be the ungarbed entity within. Now, does it remind of any story? Actually, Savitri, there are several passages which I am sure they have not been written with that conscious thought that I am putting in a story here, because it's not a mental creation but a supramental creation. But sometimes it falls so appropriate to certain stories which we read in our legends. To me, these lines always reminded of the story of Draupadi's Chirharan. And literally, you see, he's using the word ungarbed, naked, supernatural darkness. Imagine the most powerful kings are there and they have ordered, sanctioned, and her own husbands, who are as mighty, if not more, are helpless. Look at the play of destiny, and one would say, how adverse. But that is the moment of apocalypse. So, all supports. The surface soul is clinging to Bhima, to Arjuna, to Yudhishthir, to Dronacharya, to Bhishma. They are the guardians. So when all that is taken away, then she is ready for meeting the divine. That is why it is sometimes said Adhi Raat Prabhu Darshan Deve. It doesn't mean that midnight I'll go and sit in the cemetery and get darshan. It is the dark night of the soul. And during that moment when all props are taken away, it's our chance for God to come in and say, I am your eternal bedfellow and I am here. Are you willing to be with me? But we are still looking for, we don't even notice. That's our problem. That hour had fallen now on Savitri.
So also can be when Krishna tells the gopis that you come out of the water with your hands up in the air without any fabric.
Yeah. But that story comes elsewhere. So all the story, but we can. But here it is Krishna. It is not a darkness. It is a light which has come.
The light of the
Ah.
this thing, there's no darkness.
Yeah, it is.
Properly,
It is total darkness. I mean, imagine for her. And she had so much support. Draupadi's parents are exceptionally powerful beings. Her husbands are exceptionally powerful beings. Her in-laws family is the most powerful family that time other than Yadu clan. I mean, Yadavas were as mighty as the Kurus. And at that point of time, nobody is there. Nobody is there to help her. And then that is the time she seeks help within. A point she had reached where life must be in vain, or in her unborn element awake, her will must cancel her body's destiny. So this is where we have to remember that when this point comes, we have a choice to make. Either we accept and succumb. Life is like that. Or else we wake up the will to conquer, regardless of what. And that changes our destiny. That decides the course of destiny. So this is where I think we can stop. Huh? Courage is an aspect of will. But will is more central. Courage is born out of it. It's like a godhead born out of that. But if there is no will, there will be no courage. But there can be yeah, it will come spontaneously. Sankalp.
Sankalp is much more than courage.
Or maybe two more lines we can just read. Yeah. For only the unborn spirit's timeless power can lift the yoke imposed by birth in time. Only the self that builds this figure of self can raise the fixed, interminable line that joins these changing names, these numberless lives, these new oblivious personalities. This we will read tomorrow. But essential thing is that there is on one side the body's destiny, the earthly events, happenings. On the other side there is the soul within, which actually is the master of destiny. It is the master of all the forces, only it doesn't know. It's like a prince who doesn't know he has the powers. So it is asleep, and therefore the body has to go through what it has to go through. So this is the time it must awake, and awake the will to conquer. Okay, so we'll meet tomorrow. 9:45 we can start.